Well, good morning, Barcelona, and welcome to Thursday in English Radio at RKV 106.9 FM. I'm Virgil, still and always, and amidst all of the continuing confusion, uncertainty about the coronavirus, we can take some comfort that Catalonia is beginning to return to the life we missed over the past 2 years. But bars and restaurants, are beginning to open longer, and we're beginning to see, retail stores, theaters, cinemas, and all the rest really coming back to the fore for us to enjoy. Well, we can really, savor, this moment of calm and just forget that other healthcare concerns really remain with us. And those concerns, one of the biggest one is that of cancer. During the pandemic, we have seen cancer screening tests not performed, people with cancer symptoms unable to be referred for diagnosis, and an estimated 20% of cancer patients still not receiving the surgical or therapeutic aid they need, all because of medical facilities, physicians that have focused on COVID-19. Well, joining us today to talk about this issue are Dr. Becky Campbell and a good friend and colleague, Dr. Howard Soule, both from the Prostate Cancer Foundation in Santa Monica, California. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Virgil. It's a pleasure to be here.
Thanks so much for having us.
Well, thank you for joining us. Well, before we get into the weeds of the problem, tell our listeners about the Prostate Cancer Foundation, Dr. Soule.
So we were founded in 1993 by philanthropist and financier Michael Milken with really a single goal, which was to eliminate advanced prostate cancer as a health risk for men and their families. To this point, the foundation supported hundreds of millions of dollars of very high impact medical research programs throughout the world, including in Barcelona and Madrid. Very proud of our ties to España. And the FDA approved treatments for advanced prostate cancer, including those that support care, those that shrink cancers and make them help patients get into remission, have all had their origins in PCF-funded science programs for the past 27 years. So we're extremely proud of our achievements, but we have a lot of work left to do.
Yes, for sure. Dr. Campbell, you've been involved in developing a new prostate cancer patient guide. What does it cover and how best should it be used?
Sure, absolutely. So this is actually the third print update of the guide that was originally published in 2017. So we've been updating it all along periodically as standards of practice change and new developments come along for prostate cancer patients. It focuses all of the current and active information available about prostate cancer treatment, lifestyle factors, research into one consolidated resource. And I actually have a copy right here for those of you who are watching on video. It covers the basics of anatomy and PSA, all the way to diagnosis, treatment options for localized and advanced disease, side effects, obviously a major concern, cancer risk, wellness and prevention. So it's really for any man, any patient who has been newly diagnosed, who's in treatment, or who might be concerned about a rising PSA. It could be for loved ones, caregivers who need key information to help the patient. Could be for family members who want to understand their own risk, given that there may be a diagnosis of prostate cancer in the family. In terms of how to use it, that's a great question. Obviously, it's not a substitute for medical advice, but it really is a starting point so you know what questions to ask your doctor. So for example, if you haven't heard of something important like biomarker testing of your tumor, if you don't know about asking that, then you might miss out on some important care. So it really is priming the patient in terms of what types of conversations to have with their doctor. You know, you can read it straight through, or you can look in the table of contents, just choose the parts that apply to you right now. Maybe you want to review side effects before a conversation with your doctor. Mark it up, yours, use sticky notes, and then use it as a jumping point to go to pcf.org for more information.
Perfect. Well, we'd like to talk to our guest in greater depth right after this. Well, that was Benjamin Herman with a song reminiscent of the style of Eddie Harris called Trouble. We're talking today with Dr. Becky Campbell and Dr. Howard Soule from the Prostate Cancer Foundation in Santa Monica about the impact of coronavirus on cancer care in general. We talked earlier about the under-recognition of the situation, that so much of cancer care has been gone by the wayside due to coronavirus. Why should we really be concerned about this, Dr. Soule?
Well, prostate cancer is a very curable disease in many patients when the disease is found early in its history. And delaying appropriate screening through your family care doctor is not a good idea and can result in a tumor that's diagnosed at a more advanced and less treatable stage. So our concern about patients foregoing healthcare screening during the pandemic is a problem. So things are getting back to normal. Can't speak for Spain, but in the United States, certainly patients are able to see their doctors again, and getting an appropriate screening evaluation from your physician is an important thing to do, to catch it early when it's curable.
I think the whole thing too is a part of it is that although there might be situations where the patients would like to have gotten screened, in many cases they'd have loved to have talked to their doctors, seen them, but because of restrictions, they really couldn't get into a hospital. The doctors couldn't see patients. And I guess now that's improving a degree, but again, there's a lot of catch up that has to be done. And so again, if we haven't been screened and we haven't really seen the potential risk, what do we need to do? I mean, how do we really force the issue, I guess is what I'm saying. Howard, are you frozen? Howard? Okay, well, Becky.
Oh, here we go.
Okay, we're back. We're back.
Hello, Virgil.
Good to see you again, Howard. I know the wonders of technology. It's great when it all works, but hey, we're in a new world and a new normal, so we have to adjust to everything. What I was saying, I guess, is that many times where we would have liked to have gotten in to see our doctors to have the screening and all the rest, we couldn't get there. The hospitals were closed, the doctors weren't taking patients in. And now everybody's playing catch up, patients and doctors as well. And it's a case where, many doctors, they want to be able to do the surgeries, do the infusions, the radiotherapies that were postponed. And now the guy who wants to come in for a screening is somewhere down on the totem pole. How do we really, really press the issue to these days? It's easy for us to say, well, I can wait some more.
Yeah, that's a really complicated question to unpack, Virgil. I would say be vigilant, be aggressive, and stay on your doctor's schedule. Just call. A lot of medicine has been practiced over the last 14, 16 months of pandemic by telehealth in the United States, especially. It's no substitute for being in a room with your physician, but it is a good way to help your physician prioritize your case and make sure that you get in at the earliest possible time, because that's the goal. The good news about prostate cancer is that it grows slowly. And can, a few weeks, a couple of months, in some cases won't make a difference in the patient's outcome. For other patients, recognition by their physician of a more advanced situation would mean they should be seen sooner and more urgently. And I believe that things will be freeing up nicely. We're in a bit of a logjam right now, but I see the end in sight.
I know, I do too, with fingers crossed, definitely. Now, Dr. Campbell, in the new Prostate Cancer Patient Guide that you're providing for patients and their families, you've included updates for COVID-19. What are they and what should patients do with this information?
You're absolutely right, Virgil. This is actually an appendix to the main patient guide. It's called Your Care During the COVID-19 Pandemic, and people can download it from our website at pcf.org/guides. What's really interesting is that we just updated this since we initially published the appendix back in May of 2020. So in May of 2020, it was all about what to do if your care was delayed, because everybody was concerned about cancer and other diseases. If I've just been diagnosed, how am I going to get the care I need? And we addressed some of the issues that Howard was talking about, and that prostate cancer is slow growing, and you may not have to worry as much as maybe other conditions. Now, with this new update, we can really focus on educating patients with prostate cancer and their families about the importance of getting the vaccine. So we really focus on frequently asked questions about the vaccine because, as we know, not everyone is getting it, and that's due to a variety of reasons. We also emphasize the importance of keeping up with those appointments that you might have for follow-ups, now that most clinics, at least in many locations, are operating normally. We address mental health, how you can help yourself re-enter life if you've been feeling anxious about that. But we kept in the information about what to consider if your care is delayed, in the future, if a certain area needs to go on a modified lockdown due to a surge. We don't know what's going to happen with COVID and the variants coming up. So that information is still there, and what to ask your doctor if there's something going on in your area that might delay your care.
Have we seen any data to suggest that cancer patients might be at greater risk from COVID, either from contracting or from delayed effects of even treatment for the disease? Is there any kind of correlation yet that's been seen?
I don't think so, Virgil. The data collection process on COVID-19 is going to take a long time to sort out. And be peer reviewed, and these questions will ultimately be answered. But today, the best chance you have of being healthy is to be vaccinated. To practice public health policy guidelines. Probably still wear a mask even if you have been vaccinated if you're in a crowded area. But I think getting vaccinated is the key to getting back to normal. The data will come, but it's not on the tip of the tongue right now.
And well, what the pandemic has revealed to us is that our healthcare systems really globally are at risk, and the most basic of critical care needs can be restricted to those patients either at risk or in need. Now, how should we act going forward to become more proactive, both personally and as nations?
I just finished reading a great book titled Medicare for All. And, I think in the United States, the pandemic took the bedsheet off of problems that we knew were there, having to do with healthcare access, disparities in certain minority populations where healthcare access is limited. And I'm not a very political person, and I don't intend to be political today. But if you want to know what Medicare for All is, or healthcare for everybody, just look at the vaccine rollout. It didn't cost anybody a dime, whether you were insured or uninsured. You just rolled into Dodger Stadium or into a drugstore in your neighborhood, a pharmacy, and you received the vaccine, which is an awesome thing. So I think, hopefully the lessons learned and the memories that have been emblazoned in many of our minds will help us to do a better job of advocating healthcare equity, healthcare access to more people, especially in the United States, where the problem is acutely identified.
I agree with that totally. I mean, having been here in Europe and seeing what universal healthcare looks like, it's a big difference. It is a big difference. And I think, the vaccine program could be, first step toward, truly getting, at least, the Affordable Care Act expanded to its full potential for all of us. We'll be back with our guest in just a minute. Well, that was John Wright with 35th Street Blues, referring to my old neighborhood back in Chicago. We're talking today again with Dr. Becky Campbell and Dr. Howard Soule from the Prostate Cancer Foundation about cancer, COVID, and care. We've been receiving various reports saying that prostate cancer death rates are declining. Is this still true in this time of the coronavirus? Dr. Soule.
Well, we don't know the answer to that question yet, Virgil. The data that are collected from mostly from public health service, Medicare, it's called the SEER database, is a couple of years behind. So to say that there's been a decline in deaths, the declines in cancer deaths for all diseases, at least in the United States, for all organ sites, has been going down a small amount each year, a few percent, which is a very, very positive finding. But sometimes these data are compounded by, let's say, fewer people coming to the hospital to pass away, unfortunately, which certainly will be the case for the period called the COVID-19 pandemic. So how the data are manipulated and presented, it'll be a few years before we know a more precise answer to your question.
I think, that's true. I think, we start looking at, the data. One of the things that, we're looking at here, and as we're talking about the vaccine program and all of that, I think probably part of the reason why a lot of people are not stepping up to get the vaccine is that somehow they think that we've solved the problem, that it's all over. But I think they're confusing the issue of emergency use authorization with approval. And I think in reality, we're still in almost a phase 3 clinical trial phase with this whole COVID thing. We're still evaluating what's working, what's not working, and how effectively vaccines are going to be.
Yeah, since we're old friends, Virgil, for decades now, I can disagree with you respectfully,
Absolutely.
Which I will do. So, a lot of cancer treatments, indeed, for unmet medical needs, are approved by the FDA, sort of a conditional approval, where the agency, the regulatory agency, will allow the drug to be used and patients are treated, but the company has to continue collecting data. So it may allow approval based on a surrogate endpoint, like does it shrink a tumor, or does it prevent a tumor from progressing? But to figure out if a cancer therapy is really useful, it has to do two things: improve quality of life and prolong overall survival. And that's what the FDA looks for at the end of the day before they approve a drug. For COVID-19, and by the way, the cancer trial might be 300, 500, or 1,000 patients. For COVID-19, companies like Pfizer, Moderna, AstraZeneca, Johnson & Johnson did immense clinical trials, 30,000, 40,000 patient clinical trials that were the basis for what's called in the United States emergency use authorization. So when 15,000 people are exposed to a new treatment, if something was horribly wrong with this vaccine, you would see it. And now that the vaccine has been exposed to, or that hundreds of millions of people have been exposed to these vaccines, things that occur at very small rates, side effects, are observed. I had fever and chills after the second dose. I was happy to have that. These vaccines are safe and effective, and they will get final approval from the FDA. In fact, Pfizer already is in the process of making a huge data submission to the Food and Drug Administration in the United States to get final approval. And that's the way it's done. But never in history were this many people exposed to an experimental, treatment. And I would say people should take solace and should have comfort in the safety and the efficacy of these vaccines, not only to prevent your own illness, but to prevent you from spreading it to naive people.
Well, I think that's the thing we face here, is that we've had a lot of lockdowns and very tight restrictions here compared to the the States, for example. And we just lifted one this past Sunday. People have gone crazy. They're in the streets, they're partying, they got fireworks, they build, and it's like they think that somehow, since we've gotten maybe 30% of people have been vaccinated, all of a sudden, the danger is over. And they still don't get a reality check of saying, okay, we got to get some degree of herd immunity out here and being able to get that in place. But apart from that, we're looking at, we've seen the impact of, COVID on millions and millions of people around the world, but it's been particularly deadly on those populations that have had negative impact from cancer, like people of African descent, Latinos, Hispanics, the poor, and the elderly. I mean, what guidance can we give to people in these groups?
Virgil, if I could,
please.
Go ahead, Becky. That's okay.
Sure. Absolutely. This is a huge problem that I know you and Dr. Soule touched on earlier, with COVID bringing into the light the disparities that have been around for decades. In terms of prostate cancer, we know that in Latino populations, Hispanic and Latino men in the US are less likely to receive definitive treatment for high-risk prostate cancer, for example. And what PCF is doing to address this issue is to create a Spanish language patient guide that will be released later this year. We know having relevant information in your own language can empower you as the patient to be a partner in your own care. So we're very excited that, at least in one small respect, we'll be able to help a segment of the population that may not have access to educational materials in language.
Which is great, I think. But again, part of the problem is that, yes, we need to have those materials. But there was a recent study that showed that, apart from just materials alone, having a medical professional who looks like you is probably even more of a relevant issue than just the materials alone.
Absolutely agree. And we're seeing that potentially with the COVID vaccine, right? We're having experts who are hundreds of miles away. They don't look like me. They don't understand my issues. I'm maybe not going to trust that person when they're talking about a vaccine, but folks are more likely to listen to their family doctor who's been in their community for decades, maybe their pastor whom they know and trust. So absolutely, having a trusted messenger deliver that information is going to be hugely important going forward.
There's no question about it. And I think, Howard, you and I have been in the same conversation for decades, talking about the issue of trying to help folks who have been disproportionately impacted by the disease, and how we need to change things going forward. And I mean, are you seeing changes, in terms of medical schools or in professional settings to address this in any way?
Well, I think it's safe to say that frank, meaningful, and impactful conversations with plans are occurring in academic medical centers throughout the United States to solve the problems and the issues that you bear light on, Virgil. We have a long way to go. It's you're talking about 300 years of horror for certain populations in the United States. That there seems to be an awakening, a generational awakening it's happened at least twice in my lifetime. Obviously not so successful the last time. Hopefully the current awakening will help solve these issues related to healthcare access disparity, treatments, outcomes. Our foundation certainly is funding significant amount of research in this area to bring solutions, as well as better tests for minority populations. And our partnership, Virgil, at the Department of Defense Prostate Cancer Research Program, where we have literally funded hundreds of millions of dollars worth of so-called disparity science that I think is awakening and turning a corner and focusing on issues today that are more significant than some of the biology that we thought we understood. But It's not biology, it's
No,
sociology, it's psychology.
absolutely. Well, we'd like to talk more with our guest right after this. And that was Pat Metheny with Look Ahead. But we're looking ahead here with Dr. Howard Soule and Dr. Becky Campbell from the Prostate Cancer Foundation, talking to us about cancer care in the age of COVID-19. Now, we've talked quite a bit before about the importance of research in fighting diseases of all types, and how the Prostate Cancer Foundation has had a long-term commitment to research on prostate cancer. What are some of the gains that you think have been made?
Well, I'll go to both ends of the disease. From the beginning of the disease, when prostate cancer screening can be performed with a simple blood test called PSA, prostate specific antigen test. This simple blood test can tell what a man's risk is of being subsequently diagnosed with prostate cancer. The screening is controversial. However, if done with the proper consent and understanding from the patient, and with new treatments for primary prostate cancer, it can extend life. And a lot of these patients that are found to have very, very early and very tiny prostate cancers can undergo surveillance for their disease without reducing their lifespan by 1 minute. So that's the good news. Get screened by a smart doctor, and then make sure you're getting the benefit of Dr.
Get treated by a
Campbell's
smart
patient
doctor
guide.
too, Howard. That's the other thing, getting treated by a smart doctor. I mean,
Getting treated, but having the knowledge that Dr. Campbell's patient guide that she so expertly composed for our foundation and has been peer reviewed by dozens of top docs all over the world is essential. So think about screening. When you're 50, if you're part of a minority, certain minority populations, you may want to start sooner. So that's the good news. I think prostate cancer screening finally has been put into the correct context in primary care medicine. So that's good news. Then if you go all the way to the end, to the poor guy who did everything right or didn't do everything right, but in either case ends up with disease outside of the prostate, there are many new medications and many new scanning technologies. I'll talk about one in just a second, that can help doctors find the cancer and burn it up or treat it with medications before it does severe harm to an individual. We're really proud of research we have funded since 1993 on a molecule that sits on the surface of the tumor cell called prostate-specific membrane antigen, or PSMA. That target on the tumor can now be, radioactive atoms can be sent to that molecule just on the prostate cancer to see smaller and smaller deposits of tumor outside of the prostate gland that help physicians better interpret the status of an individual patient. That's called molecular imaging. It's called the PSMA PET scan. Now, that same little targeting agent can be hooked up with a very powerful radioactive atom that will go only to the tumor. The rest of it gets washed out of the patient's body within a few hours. And now it sits there and it sends an atom, a powerful atom, into the cell. That atom is able to kill prostate tumors systemically. So never before have there been more interesting treatments to prolong patients' life than there are today. And Virgil, I could go on for 2 hours. I'm not going to, but there are many other new treatments that if you look at Dr. Campbell's patient guide, you will see and learn about all of them. They're all detailed with great accuracy and care. And I think there's never been a better time for patients than today.
Well, I'm just going to ask Dr. Campbell about the patient guide. So if a patient at some point is looking at downstream care, the possibility of advanced stage disease or possible clinical trials, what kind of guidance is in the guide to be able to help them decide that, yes, maybe this is something I need to talk to my doctor about, and how do I go about getting into one?
Absolutely. Clinical trials are essential to discovering these new curative and life-extending treatments in cancer and other diseases. So we have an extensive section actually that was newly updated on advanced disease, detailing many of the new treatments that have come out in recent years. And we have a section on clinical trials. Yes, they're certainly used at advanced stages, but really at all stages of prostate cancer, to help us understand how to treat men, even with early stage disease, up to advanced disease as well. So there's many myths and facts about clinical trials that I won't get to right now. But one thing to remember is that, and we include this in the guide, patients don't receive a sugar pill, right? They receive the minimum standard of care. So that's certainly a myth that we address in the guide. So patients, at any stage of disease can talk to their doctor about clinical trials and ask if that might be the right option for them, and keep that discussion going throughout the course of illness.
And I think, again, we have to tell them, Tuskegee doesn't exist anymore in terms of that kind of a malevolent issue in terms of our history, and it isn't today, again, present. Now, President Nixon declared war on cancer in 1971. And 50 years later, we're still fighting. We've seen many government agencies, cancer centers, independent investigators, and foundations like yours, putting effort and money behind the fight against the disease. Yet we've seen that even paleontologists have discovered the presence of prostate cancer in mummies going back 2,000 years ago. Questions that come up here, why haven't we found a cure yet? And with the prevalence of prostate cancer going back centuries, is it a cancer that can be cured? Or should we look at it as something just to be managed?
Yeah, I would say the best outcome for cancer, until there is a magic bullet that is a one-stop cure. But in the absence of a one-stop cure, the advances in medicine, especially in medical oncology, to transform prostate cancer into a chronic manageable disease instead of a life-threatening, immediately lethal disorder is somewhat of a breakthrough. Unfortunately, patients still pass away from advanced prostate cancer. But, Virgil, ultimately we have to die of something. We're not going to live forever. So if a man, makes it into his 80s, his 90s, with sort of like diabetes, which is, a chronic, but, if you stay on it, it's treatable in most cases. So that's a near-term hope, but we haven't given up on a magic bullet yet. And I hope to see that in our lifetime.
Well, as one of the first sergeant once told me, you expect to live forever, so it was like, yeah, we have to keep going and continue to do it. And I think, again, what we're doing at the DOD, what you're doing at the Prostate Cancer Foundation is that we're really working toward it. And we've seen things get better, and I think they're going to continue to get better. So I think from that standpoint, it's important. We'll be back for some closing comments from our guest right after this. Well, that was Beth Hart doing I'd Rather Go Blind. And we don't have to be blind about our healthcare anymore, as long as we take our advantage of what we have out here. Now, if our listeners want to get more information about the Prostate Cancer Foundation and the new Prostate Cancer Guide, where can they find it and where can they get it, Dr. Campbell?
Great question, Virgil. So it's very simple. Go to pcf.org/guides to order your free digital PDF copy. And we can also ship printed hard copies within the United States. So that's pcf.org/guides. There's lots of other information on our site about prostate cancer. And we haven't touched on it today much, but we also have a wellness guide covering nutrition and lifestyle to help folks live better both during and after a cancer diagnosis. And it's even for folks who are interested in ways to prevent any number of chronic diseases. So you can also get the science of living well beyond cancer at that same pcf.org/guides.
Just tell me that, regular doses of wine go a long way toward helping, the better living of life.
That is a great question. I wish that were true. In red wine, you might have heard of resveratrol, which is
Yes.
a phytonutrient. We'd have to drink way too much wine in order to get the benefits of resveratrol. So,
well, it all depends on what's way too much wine.
well, maybe Spain versus the US, maybe a different type of culture, but enjoy once in a while, a drink if you like with friends, relax, drink a lot of water. But resveratrol is not the magic bullet. There's definitely still some research to be done for that yet.
Okay, can we see at least it couldn't hurt?
In moderation.
Perfect.
Not medical advice, but relax and enjoy with your friends.
Good common sense, yes. Now, I guess if there's one thing that you would recommend to all of us that we should do relative to living well and living long in this age of cancer and coronavirus, what would it be? And I pose that question to both of you.
Well, for me, it would be exercise. I'm an ardent believer in hard workout. An individual should check with their doctor, especially older individuals. But there are data. Dr. Campbell has written about this in blogs and wellness guides that, I think we've set the bar pretty low for exercise and wellness, that unfortunately it has to be a little painful, not a lot, but, it shouldn't cause pain for a long period of time after you're finished. But while you're doing it, a little bit of pain is probably not bad. But exercises that build muscle are the best for protecting your bones, for general wellness, for prevention of metabolic diseases like diabetes. Building muscle is the best. So endurance exercise as well as weight-bearing exercise added together, and a good diet that Dr. Campbell's Wellness Guide will teach you all about, are some things that everybody could do to reduce burden of overall disease, let alone prostate cancer, probably.
Dr. Campbell?
And I'm going to have to agree with Dr. Soule on that one, spot on. It would be prioritizing your wellness as much as you can. And especially with the pandemic, folks might have limited resources, limited time and circumstances. So that may look a little bit different for everyone. Maybe for some people, it's increasing your exercise, going out for a walk because you can't go to the gym. For others, since many of us have been so stressed with the new burdens placed on us, maybe it's really focusing on your mental wellness, because it's going to be your ability to cope with chronic diseases like cancer, even our immune system's response to the coronavirus. Those are all going to be affected by our general, both physical health and our mental health.
I would agree. Well, we appreciate both of you being on, taking the time to join us today, and for giving us this important information. And Howard, hopefully I'll see you again in person one of these days soon.
I hope so, Virgil. You've been a friend for many years, and I value what you do communicating with patients. Your advocacy for prostate cancer throughout the world should be recognized, applauded, and a huge thank you from Becky Campbell and Howard Soule for giving us this chance today to talk to your audience.
Well, I appreciate it. Well, we'll be back again next week, folks, when we have our Smooth Jazz and Wine morning. And we'll do it healthy. We'll do it healthily, without question. But anyway, have a great one in Barcelona. We'll talk to you next week.